There's only a few Asian winemakers in BC anyways, so it's very different. You know, especially when you're working in places like Australia and that, you know, they see you, then you speak, and they're like, where's this guy from? Because he sounds like he's from North America, but he looks like he's Asian, right? But then, you know, I can speak some Japanese. So it's, you know, it's diversity, right? Like anything else. And that's kind of like what wine is too, right? Everything can be different. Nothing has to taste exactly the same. And in fact, that's part of the key, is to make wines that don't all taste exactly the same. I don't want my wine to taste like my friend's wine because I'm using similar barrel or similar techniques. I always want my wine to taste like how I wanted to make it. Not all the wines that I make, I know what they're going to taste like at the end. There's a lot of wines that I make where I'm like, okay, we'll see what that tastes like in the end. And I prefer it to be surprised near the finish rather than micromanage everything and hope that it tastes exactly like I want it. I rather gamble and get the interesting notes that come out from not being so controlling. Right? I mean, other guys would totally disagree with me, but to each their own. You can make wine the way you want. And for me, so far, like I said, I'm a good guesser, and it's worked. Right? So I just keep on doing the same thing. And I pick up things along the way too. Some of my cellar hands will say, hey, have you ever tried this? Because they're reading an article and they say this guy did this, or have you done this? And so there are certain things that I'm willing to try. I find that some, you know, senior winemakers that I know, when I talk to them about it, they're set in their ways, they just do the same thing. But for me, it's all about trying new things and experimenting and keeping things fun, because the guys that I work with in the cellar, they're passionate about wine, but they also want to learn. And that's a cool thing. Another cool thing about making wine in the Okanagan is most guys that work at these wineries are really passionate about making wine. You can go to a bigger factory style winery in Canada or in Australia or New Zealand, any of those types of places. The guys that work in there don't care about wine at all. They're just there for a paycheck and they're dragging hoses or they're part of a union or whatever. But one thing that's really nice about Canada is there's a lot of smaller wineries. So, you know, the guys downstairs, yeah, they're passionate about making wine, and that's why they work here, which is, you know, it's fun for them, it's fun for me. So, you know, did I ever think I was going to be like a teacher? No, I'm not really a teacher, but I explain to them why I do things and why I don't do things, right, because of those reasons. And then when you get to the final result and we all get to enjoy the wine, then you know what you did to make that. And that's kind of the journey that you can appreciate, right? Because it's Mother Nature and farming, and you're not going to get the same grapes every year. I mean, in beer, it happens too, but in beer, a lot of beer is by recipe. You know the ingredients you're getting, you know, it's pretty consistent. In wine, it's always different. Every year is going to be different acid, different sugar, different growing season. And then, so like I say, the best winemakers make consistently good wine no matter how good or how bad the year is. And that's the challenge of being a good winemaker, is on a year that's not so good, are you going to be able to make good wine or not? And I've seen from like a lot of the top guys that are my friends and winemakers that I know that I've worked with around the world, they know how to deal with all sorts of issues to make consistently good wine. And at the basis of it, that's what we're trying to do, right? Make good wine. And for me, it's more than just making good wine. It's making good wine without adding things to your wine. And like what I would say, Frankensteining your wine by adding tannins and adding gelatins to soften up and doing this and doing that. You know, I always joke, but I say I'm a lazy winemaker because I just want to bring the fruit in. If I have to add the yeast to it, I do. Add some nutrient, that's it. I don't want to add anything else to it. You know, when I was younger and I worked in Australia, you learn all these different things about how to fix wines, how to treat wines, how to manufacture basically wine. Like, so there's wines out in the world that, you know, they all have their place, but there's wines out in the world that I would call like the Coca-Cola wine, right? It's made in a lab, sent out into a tank, and then they make it there, right? It's not the same as how we do it here, where you're depending on Mother Nature and oak, and that's about it. So that's a kind of the purest way of describing winemaking, but to each their own. I know friends that will add a ton of different stuff to their wines all the time and not think anything of it. I just don't like that way. So I don't do it that way. So different way of doing it.